to the critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write our story.
All right. Hey, hello, good afternoon, hop a day, good morning, whatever time you might be watching this or listening to the sound of my voice. It's Gary. We're here with another Words from the Wise. This is another Behind the Anchor edition. And what this means typically is I'm bringing in somebody from the Chiefs mess or from my military career that I'd worked with, that I served with, and we're just going to catch up. And we're going to talk about all things leadership. And today, man, today is a special event because if you've ever served where America's Day begins, right, the island of Guam, the beautiful island of Guam, right? You've met this man before. He is a legend there. He is Command Master Chief, retired, Mr. Dennis Poley. So, Dennis, welcome to the stage.
Hop a day.
Up the freaking day, bro. What's up, man? How are you doing?
Everything's well, man. I'm talking to you from the future. It's Friday morning here.
Yeah, it is Friday morning there, and it is currently Thursday evening here. So, yeah, you're talking to me from the future. How's tomorrow looking?
Good day, man. Good day to be alive.
Good. Guam still hasn't flipped over?
Hasn't flipped over. A little bit of rain, but that's about it.
How's the Marine Corps buildup going? You see guys hearing anything coming out of that?
Yeah, it's going well. Camp Plaza is ticking along, like a lot of military projects, a couple glitches here and there, but moving forward. We did have an incident here about a week ago, though. Domestic Marine shot another guy in a parking lot at GPO, and you know how that goes, right? The Marines are going to be here. There's going to be problems, and
yeah. It's definitely going to be some growing pains for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sad to hear it. I saw coming out of Anderson that whole barracks hubbub that went far and wide.
Yeah.
Where they had the HSC 25 sailors living in, the Marines living. And when I first saw those pictures, I was like, that's not a Naval Base Guam barracks. I can tell you that from firsthand experience. That's not one of ours. Yeah.
Yeah, still at post-MOAR. They got hit pretty bad on that end and trying to work through it. The whole MAC terminal still closed down up there.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I remember being so complicated trying to keep those buildings full up round, because if you lost air conditioning even for a day or two, the island would start to reclaim it. I remember up there at the top of the mountain going up there. What's that base on the top of the mountain that you live on? Where all of the water buffalo are at, the caribou.
Oh, NAVMAG.
NAVMAG. I remember during COVID trying to get those NAVMAG barracks back online and trying to turn those back into being something worthwhile, because we lost those for quite a while. I don't know if they're still using those or not, but that was a big deal. So, well, hey, man, I want to talk about you, Mr. Poley, and I want to start off with you coming from, because you came from Chicago, correct?
Yes, I did.
Were you born in Chicago?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and then Poley, is Poley Italian?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about it, man. What was it like growing up in Chicago? What was that, the 60s, 70s?
60s, yeah. I'm a boomer. Born in 58.
What was it like growing up in the 60s in Chicago, bro, for Dennis Poley?
It was, compared to today, it was a great time. I mean, it was the proverbial go out till the street lights came on, come home for dinner,
Yeah.
You weren't worried about all the crazy stuff that's going on in the streets today. People looked out for it. Like if I was at my friend's house doing something stupid, his mom would slap me in the head and send me home, and call my mom, and I get slapped in the head when I got home.
So there was a good, strong community there of just people in the area that you lived in. When's the last time you went to Chicago?
Funny you should ask. I was just there a week ago. Don and I went out to see Mom. She's going to be 88. She still lives there. And flew my daughter and the grandkids in. So we all had a little family event.
Awesome.
Food's still awesome. Good pizza, hot dogs, Italian beef sandwich. Yeah.
Yeah. How did it look as far as like the neighborhood? Does your mom still live in the same house that you grew up in?
No, no, no. She moved out of there a long time ago, and she, on a lark, she just happened to buy a condominium down on Michigan Avenue,
Okay.
a small studio, and she's had it for like 30 years. Um, like every city, the gentrification
Yeah.
uh, is happening, and it's interesting because years ago there was a class I had taken, and in the class we studied the wave rejuvenation of cities, and it starts usually in downtown, and then as downtown uh, builds up, people move a little further out, right?
Yeah.
Until they keep moving out concentric rings and they're out in the burbs, and it takes so long to get back downtown. In the meantime, downtown's decaying.
Yeah.
So while everything comes down, people start moving back downtown, the cycle starts over. And you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of hope for Chicago. I think a lot of Americans love that city for a lot of various reasons. I think that just the heritage, the history, the Bulls, the Bears, right? Just Americana. For me, graduating boot camp, Chicago was one of the biggest American cities I ever went to at a young age, right? I mean, growing up in Utah,
Yeah.
I didn't just go to places like Chicago out of nowhere, right? So getting a limousine after basic training to go down to freaking Chicago and check it out was like a big deal,
Yeah.
right? So I hope to hear nothing but good things coming out of that city. And growing up, Dennis, did you know, like when you were going through school, that did you have any idea you were going to eventually join the service?
No. So actually, if you think about the years when I was like really formative, like 8th grade, high school, that time frame,
Okay.
that was the end of the Vietnam War. I was a counterculture hippie, bell bottoms, tie dye, all that.
Yeah.
Abby Hoffman, one of my, hey, this guy's cool. And what brought me into the Navy really was some things in my life. I came in later. I was working for a friend of mine's dad doing construction. Well, let me backtrack. I was a lifeguard for a lot of years down at the beach in Chicago, and a lot of seasonal stuff. And then I was a lifeguard. I was working construction for a friend of mine's dad. And there was an old guy there, Big Jake, and he was a big dude. And one day he said to me, do you want to be doing this the rest of your life? You're too smart for this, right? And even my friend's dad that owned the company would tell me, dude, what are you doing, And so I had gone to a recruiter one day, and I wanted to join the Air Force originally, I said, I want to join the Air Force.
Okay.
So you know how they do the whole thing, they have you take an ASVAB, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I took the ASVAB, I scored a 99. And I think the reason was because I was older. I was almost 26, right? So as you get older, your aperture of the world widens. And I think that's direct relation to that test. So now everybody's like, dude,
they all want you. You're a hot commodity.
All the services. And I did shop. I shopped the Army, Air Force, Navy, and I knew I wanted to be in the medical field. My goal was to really get into physical therapy, right? That's where I wanted to be.
Okay.
And so the Air Force recruiter, the day that I went there, had another guy in there, and they were just like shucking and jiving and not, well, maybe this, well, maybe that. I'm like, bro, I'm out. And I walked down the hall of the Navy recruiter. And it was interesting because my grandfather was the XO of a ship in the Italian Navy during World War II time. I didn't know that, right, at the time. And he wasn't in agreement with Mussolini's policies, and they were American. He just stayed here. So I guess I sort of had the Navy in my blood. So signed up all my Navy stuff, and off I went to boot camp at 26 years old.
26 years old. So what were you doing before you joined the Navy? Did you go to college?
Did a little college. I was working construction. I was a bus stop. I was doing some other illicit activities at the time. And
okay. Well, because that's a lot of living theoretically before you join the service, right? What I've seen in my career is that typically guys that come in a little bit older typically show up and they do a lot better, quicker, faster, stronger, because they've got like you said earlier, a little bit more seasoning when it comes to handling certain things, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Plus,
I mean,
growing up, I grew up pretty much running the streets, and I was getting to a point where all the people I grew up with, most of them were dead or in jail, drugs, and I didn't want that. And it was really weird because, if you think about back in the 60s and early 70s, everybody, you smoking pot. And so you had your little groups in high school. So I was a good athlete, but because I hung out with the stoners, right? So
Right.
then it was like I didn't fit in. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't a stoner. I was in this in between.
Right.
And so coming in the Navy, I sort of said, hey, I want to get into the medical field, physical therapy. Signed up, became a corpsman, finished Corps school, and right out of Corps school, 2 days before we graduated, they came into class, said, me and two others, you're going to want to be pharmacy techs? Okay. Went to pharmacy school. Well, because I got my dreams crushed on physical therapy. I went and talked to the chief, who was like the career counselor at the time.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I said, hey, chief, I was told, I could Corps school and go to physical therapy school. She said, well, if you're an E5, what, 6 to 10 years service. I go, well, that's not my recruiter told me. She said, well, your recruiter lied. I was like, oh.
So it wasn't that she crushed your dream. She just told you not yet.
Right.
She kept your dream alive, but you had to get
I thought I was fast tracking into the program, right?
But did you come in as an E3, E2, or did you come straight up in as an E1?
Because of college, I came in as an E3.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So you came in as an E3. You got hospital corpsman right out the gate, which, I mean, it's the biggest rate in the Navy, so it's not that complicated to get it. Right. Even though I will tell you, during my years as a recruiter, I did not put in that many hospital corpsmen. For as many as there are in the Navy, I didn't see that many join. And then you got into the pharmacist realm. And didn't that used to be its own rate once upon a time?
Pharmacist mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even that was a precursor to being an IDC.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
So to become an IDC, you've got to graduate the pharmacy school?
No, they were like the IDCs back in the day. In a way, they weren't doing what we did today, but they were and if you look up a lot of the Medal of Honor winners in the hospital corps, they're pharmacist mates. They were literally, who went from loblolly boys to pharmacist mates to corpsmen.
I would say, so hospital corpsman, and you're probably like the fourth corpsman I've had on my podcast already. My dad was a corpsman. Evidently, I get along well with hospital corpsmen. And so a lot of my career, I can look at the corpsmen as being people I gravitated to for whatever the reasons were. And of course, you eventually changed that, but I think it's not as. I thought about this earlier today as I was coming home from work. I was like, I'm going to have another Dennis is going to be on tonight, and he's going to be another corpsman. And they're like, oh, and I got a couple more corpsmen in the chute, coming up next.
Nice.
And almost all of the corpsmen that I talk to are IDCs for the most part, and you got that in common as well. But I don't want to get there quite yet. So did you go to boot camp in Great Lakes, or did you go to
San Diego?
San Diego.
And the reason was that it was all right. The reason was they didn't want to send people from Chicago to boot camp there because they could just walk out the gate and go home.
That makes sense.
That's what I was told anyway. And boot camp was an adventure, man, because when I got there, the company commander was a second class OS2 Wallace. I've been looking for this guy for years, man. So he was my company commander, and he called me in the office, and he stuttered, which was, we tried not to make fun, but he would sit me down like, holy, you're the same age as me. So he let me he'd go home and told me I was like in charge. And then I was there for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Oh, wow.
So they had us, if you got a package from home, you had to open it and share with everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, it was like I was that. And then he made me the yeoman of the company because I could write and speak. And
okay. So just for context to the people out there listening, What year did you join the United States Navy?
November 1984.
I was like third grade, second,
Yeah.
third grade. Good for you. Okay, so November 1984, the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Woo! What was it? So you graduated boot camp. Where was Hospital Corps A school? Was it Great Lakes?
Right there in San Diego.
San Diego. So what was it like being a young sailor, fresh out of basic training in the 80s in Southern California?
It was cool. I lived in an old wooden World War II open bay barracks by the
Okay.
helo pad, and if the helo came in, the whole building would shake. And
Okay.
I did have an interesting incident downtown. So downtown San Diego was going through the regentrification, refurbishing, putting in the mall. And one night I was downtown, not in uniform, just down there, and my buddy had stopped to look at something, and I just was standing on the street, not doing anything. And I got a ticket by the police for loitering. They told me I was blocking the sidewalk.
Okay.
And I told the officer, because I was heavy into lifting at the time, right? I
Okay.
told the officer, hey, that's sort of a compliment because I'm trying to achieve to get bigger. But sir, I'm not, 15 feet wide and not
Yeah.
apologize. And so I got a ticket, went to court, and I actually went and took a picture of the sidewalk with a measuring tape. And I went to court and I explained to the judge, and the judge was just looking at the police officer. He dismissed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But did you find like the community was good to sailors back then in San Diego?
Yeah, I didn't have any issues of who you're a sailor.
Yeah.
I didn't have that until later in my career when I transferred to Norfolk.
Okay, so we'll talk about that then, because I always grew up on hearing those stories. Sailors, Marines, stay off the grass, blah blah blah. And but
Norfolk.
when I served in San Diego, because a lot of my time was overseas, but I did 7.5 years in San Diego, and they were nothing but great for us as far as the community loved us.
Yeah, I loved it there.
Yeah. Now I will tell you, in Long Beach, though, on the other hand, we were up there at Seal Beach one time, and a couple of my sailors got their butts kicked by a house party, and that was a little more tougher. But there was no more of a significant Navy presence. It was just you go up there and you load up your boat with bullets and go out, But it's still Long Beach, right? It's still LA. You can't go up there.
Yeah.
You walk by the house party, maybe you don't say nothing to the house parties. Keep on walking, bud.
Yeah, if you're looking for trouble, you can always find it, right?
That's a fact, Jack. So you're in how long was Hospital Corps School? Was it like 6 months?
Yeah, roughly. I went. Let's see. I got there in about 6 months.
Okay. So Hospital Corps and then PHC school right behind that, or the pharmacist
Pharmacy school.
that?
Yeah, literally like the next week.
And that was in San Diego too?
Right. And so I had right from Corps school to pharmacy school, graduated from there, and then got orders to Oceana, NAS Oceana.
To what, like the hospital or the clinic or something there?
To the clinic, yeah.
So did you take the HM3 test there in San Diego?
No. Took it when I got to
Oceana?
Yeah.
That's not Oceana is great because it's in Virginia Beach. Did you enjoy that?
I did, and it was interesting because I originally had orders to the hospital, Portsmouth, and one of my classmates had orders to Oceana. And I had befriended a civilian that worked in admin that was handling orders and stuff.
Right.
And they pulled me aside and they said, bro, you don't want to go to Portsmouth Hospital.
Yeah, those tunnels.
You definitely want to be in Virginia Beach. So I talked to this one guy and I said, hey, man, you want to switch? And we swapped orders, and I went to Oceana and he went to Portsmouth.
What a world where that could actually be a thing where you could just swap orders with somebody. How did you just called the detailer and said, hey, man, we want to change it up?
Yeah.
Nice. So when you went to NAS Oceana and you were there for the clinic, was that 2 years or was that a 3-year billet?
3 years.
Okay. So 3-year billet. And did you enjoy being in Virginia Beach? Did you enjoy the duty station?
Oh, I liked Virginia Beach. I actually wound up, through my career, was there quite a bit. I had a house there for about 20 years.
Okay. And when you left Oceana, were you an HM2 by that point?
HM3.
HM3 at that point. Okay. And how was promotion as the corpsman rate back then? Was it as challenging as it is now?
If you study, you do well. I was a knucklehead. First time I took the test, I just thought, well, I know everything about everything.
Okay.
So it took me a couple tries to make third, and then I sort of got serious. But interesting turn was when I finished that tour at Oceana, I got out.
I feel like I do remember this part. So but let's go over it again. So you chose to get out of the United States Navy.
Yeah. So what happened was I was listening to other people. So I had orders pending to go to Naples. And people were going, dude, it's a shithole. You don't want to go to Naples, blah, blah, blah. So I told the recruiter, hey, man, you got anything else? He goes, nope, just Naples. And I said, well, I'm getting out. So I got out I wanted to go back to school, right? So I got out, moved to Missouri, was going to the University of Missouri. I got out like on a Monday, joined the reserves on Tuesday. I was in the reserves, was going to school. And then I got mobilized for the Gulf War reserve unit. We did the Fleet Hospital in Bahrain. And I realized at that time that, because I was looking at going I wanted to be a nurse anesthetist, so nursing. Mm-hmm. And I realized after that tour, I didn't like nurses, let alone want to be one. So as I was coming back to demobilize, if you remember the old Link magazine.
Okay, I did.
So I made E5 in the reserves.
Okay.
And there was an article in Link magazine about they needed IDCs. So I applied for IDC school as a USNR.
Okay.
And I was an E5 under 5, just at 5 years.
Yeah.
Which was unheard of. I went to IDC school, and it was, if I didn't pass IDC school, I would have been back to the reserves. I wouldn't have been on active duty. So when I graduated IDC school and then converted over active duty.
Wow. So, I heard by the way, I heard the bark. You used to got those two big old German Shepherds. Are they big German Shepherds now?
They're about 108 pounds.
When I left Guam, they were little babies.
Yeah.
You had just gotten them. I remember that. The last time I was up at your house, you just had them. Now I heard the bass. Okay. So hold on. You got out of the Navy. You go to Missouri. How'd you get to Missouri, bro?
All right, ready? You ready for this one? So at the time, I was working at the pharmacy.
Okay.
And I got married, and the girl I married was last name Ricketts, as in the USS Ricketts, Admiral Ricketts. And they were from Missouri. Her dad was the commanding officer at Norfolk Naval Station for the comms. He was in charge of like all the comms. And her grandparents lived in Missouri. We wound up there, was going to school, and then from there came back in.
Was she in the Navy at the time too, or is she civilian?
Civilian.
So was her dad still in the military, or he retired?
Yeah. Still active.
You were dating an admiral's daughter as an HM3 in Virginia Beach.
Oh, so it was sort of awkward.
I bet. Okay, but hey, good for you guys. You got married. What did she think about when you got mobilized to go to the Persian Gulf? Was she like, how'd that go? Was that good?
Well, her dad was actually, had been CO with the ship and been deployed, so it wasn't a big thing.
Okay. And then you came back and you decided to go back active duty as an IDC, and was she supportive of that?
Not so much.
Not so much. Okay. So you passed. Where was IDC school back in
San Diego? Back in San Diego.
Back in San Diego.
Yeah.
You graduate IDC school. Now you're going active duty. What are you now? Like 32, 31, 32?
I'm sorry. What was that?
Are you like 32 years old at that point?
I was 30.
30. Okay. So you get out of the Navy, you get back in IDC school, you graduate IDC school. Where do you get selected to go for your first set of IDC orders?
So I've had a pretty blessed career. So here I am in IDC school, and that's about a 13-month school, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how was that school for you? Was that
It was,
complicated?
you know what? It just was a routine. You just, if you go in there and you just focus on the school, you can do extremely well. The
Okay.
people have problems when they get caught up with personal issues, family stuff.
Yeah.
Usually drags them down. But at the time, I don't know if they're still doing it. If you maintained a 91 average upon graduation, you got promoted to E6. So we had a bunch of hungry E5s in our class. So we had study groups and we were killing it.
Good.
Yeah. So I got lucky. And then again, I'm about, let's see, March. So around November, it's about 4 or 5 months before graduation, again, an article in the link. The link needed, they needed DMTs to go to IDC school. So my little hamster wheel starts spinning. I go, hey, maybe I can do 20 years in the Navy just going to school. I'm going to apply for this, see what happens. They said, oh, man, this will never happen. But my military advisor, Senior Chief Moss, good dude, he said, he came in one day and he said, hey, can you, if I let you go, can you get a physical done today? I said, yeah. So I ran through the wickets, got my physical done, applied. And lo and behold, man, I got picked up for dive school. I was the first person to ever do it that way, to go from IDC to dive.
Yeah, I was going to say, because typically they take the DMTs as like HM2s, HM3s, and then make them earn their opportunity to go to IDC school, right?
Right. I got, like, I did it backwards, and then here I am in dive school. I was 34.
What's the difference for dive school for DMTs versus Navy divers? Is it the exact same school?
So years ago, I don't know what they're doing now, but years ago, the DMTs who were going to become IDCs, they went to Groton, and they went to school with the sub guys because of the rad health piece. That's just how it was laid out. I was really the first surface force IDC to go to dive school. And then I had a class behind me, another guy did it as well.
I mean, because to that point, the DMTs are heavily involved in the submarine force, and that's because of the whole hyperbaric medicine piece, right?
The hyperbaric piece, right?
Yeah, I mean, Guam, we got a lot to deal with that because they got that big dive locker there and that big hyperbaric chamber. But I had no visibility at the time of the amount of medical officers that were in the submarine community to be dive medical officers.
Right.
Right. And there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
There was a lot of, I had no idea about that till I got to Guam and I got the chance to be around the submarine force and see that. And so I could see why Groton would be a piece of that. So you go to dive school, and how was dive school? I mean, were you a big swimmer? Did you have to be like a big, great swimmer?
Being a lifeguard, I was in the water, played water polo, so I wasn't scared of the water, right?
Okay.
PT, I was always into fitness, so PT. So, you just do your PT and, was I getting my ass kicked from some of the 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, I represented the old guys.
So just so I understand, did you pick up HM1 out of IDC school with that 91?
I did, but it was even crazier because I picked it up and I got called in by the career counselor who told me that because I was under 6 years, Zone A, I was under 6 years, I couldn't put it on for another year. Oh, no, I didn't have enough time to rate. So when I graduated, it was in my record, but I couldn't put it on for another 9 months.
But they let you keep it.
But I got to keep it.
I remember that when I first joined the Navy, that time and rate was a big deal. And then they got rid of that probably when I was about a third class, I feel like. But I remember thinking that was going to be a limiting factor for people in their careers because I felt like they were holding you back. And then they got to be this thing where if you got an EP, only a certain percentage could promote. And then eventually the whole thing just went away. Yeah. Okay, so now you're an HM1, you're an IDC, you're graduating DMT. Where's your first dive assignment?
I went to SDV Team 2. So I had a choice. The detailer told me So I was going to go to SDV Team 1. They were in San Diego.
Mhm.
And at the time, I found out they were moving to Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
And then I was in Little Creek I went to SDV Team 2 and talked to this one Chief Dietrich Snelling. He was just freaking trip, man. So back then, it was, all the frogs. It was like pirate community. So I walk in, we talk a little bit. And I said, well, I'm on my way to dive school. Detailer told me I can pick either. And he sort of just eyeballing me. He goes, you haven't been arrested? I said, yeah, but I wasn't convicted.
Yeah.
He said, you ever been to Caps Mask? I said, yeah, but it was thrown out. He goes, all right, well, if you graduate, call me. So I graduated dive school. Called the detailer and said, hey, man, I graduated. I want to go to SDV Team 2. And I wound up spending 6 years there. I was got there as an E5, left there as a chief, was their Sailor of the Year as an E6. It was a phenomenal freaking tour, man.
And did I hear you say that correctly? Were they Virginia Beach or were they out there in Hawaii?
No, Virginia Beach and Little Creek.
Virginia Beach. So was SDV Team 2 over in Little Creek? Is that where they're at?
Right. We're on the base in Little Creek, yeah.
Okay. How was that, man? Because now you walk into this community that's completely just different than Oceana Clinic.
Oh, yeah, it was. So I got to be honest, when I first got there, and like my first week, and going out to PT, right? I'm thinking, hey, I'm PTing with these freaking super studs. I'm gonna get killed, but I found out like everywhere else, right? You got your people who excel, you got your middle of the road folks, and you got some folks who just are there. So I learned a lot, though. I learned a lot there. I would say my leadership at that time, because I wasn't really focused on leadership, but that's where everything started taking place. The small unit tactics, being responsible for each other, learning to grow your junior people.
Yeah.
And so when I was there, I had the XO one day. He came in and said, hey, you're going to run the medical department. Okay. And then I took a debt out. And on the deployment, I got my Dolphins because we were assigned to the sub. So it was, since we had ordered the subs, you could apply for the program. And I got my Dolphins. And that sort of pushed me over the top for other things. Got my Dolphins, Sailor of the Year, made chief that year.
Well, I was going to ask you, how many first classes were in the SDV team? Was it about 15, 30?
Across the board,
yeah.
Maybe 30, 60. We probably had 200, maybe 200 people.
Okay.
In command, maybe 220. Each team, we had 4 teams. Each team was about 32 people. And then you had your admin staff. So I don't know, maybe 30, maybe.
Okay. So, and it's the thing about those teams is the people that I've met throughout my career. I mean, I've never had the honor of being stationed. I'm a regular Navy kind of guy, right? I've never been anywhere like that, but I do know they typically attract people that are high performers or that stick around for a long time. So, I mean, did you look back on that and say, I want to be as competitive as possible, or did it just kind of work out that way? I mean, why'd you get your fish?
I think it was just the community. So when I got there, PTing just sort of fit in, it was just sort of a good niche. And then as time went on, what had happened was we went out on a debt, we in a platoon, and we got weathered out because I told you we spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico, right, doing workups.
Okay.
So I think it was either Typhoon Hugo came through, or a hurricane. But because of the hurricane, we couldn't do any ops, and there was nothing to do on the boat. And one of the chiefs said, hey, why don't you told a couple of us, why don't you guys look into that? So I did.
Yeah.
And then fast forward a year and a half later, we were on deployment. So we're in Rota, Spain. We would deploy out of Rota, Spain, and then do bilats with other communities. And the chief came up to me, Dan Mikulski, good man, came up and said, he He goes, hey, you can stay here in Rhoda and drink every night, or I talked to the program manager on the sub, one of the senior chiefs. Our next port was going to be Toulon. We were going to Toulon, France, to work with the Commando Hubert, right? So he said the boat's going from Rhoda to Toulon. He said you can get on that boat and work on your quals and do something with yourself. And so I said, all right, Chief. So now here I am at 4:30 in the morning outside of the submarine as they're having quarters, thinking, what am I getting into?
Yeah.
And then I got on the boat, and all I did, I get up in the morning and work on quals, and got my card signed off, and took aboard.
Well, and I mean, back in the day, I mean, corpsmen are still kind of at a disadvantage in the diver community because they're still corpsmen.
Right.
Right. They don't have their own particular rating that's going to make them be separated. So when they want to go for chief or whatever it is, they got to go against all the other corpsmen. Right. But that was a big problem back in the day before they had all these individual ratings for all the different special warfare communities. And so I remember being on board Ogden, for example, or even on Bellawood, and you'd have the special deployments where they'd be there. They'd be getting their warfare pins because they're trying to be competitive for freaking for chief in particular, because it was a nationally recognized promotion system. It wasn't localized to their community. And that was a challenge. So I can imagine why they were telling you guys, go get your fish, because back in those days, whenever they got the chance to be embarked on board a ship, they were probably trying to get their warfare pins. Right.
Well, it was all about how do you, So I compare joining the Navy, like being in the Navy, to being in your neighborhood when you were a kid playing football in the alley or something. It's real simple. That old car is out of bounds. That telephone pole is the goal line. I mean, the Navy's structured in such a way where it's not rocket science. And once you figure out the formula, you're like, all right, I got this.
Yeah. I was telling a story the other night about when I was at DC-1 and I had got like a Sailor of the Year and I had got a really good eval. And I had no clue what any of that meant at that stage in my career. And there was a senior chief that came alongside me and helped me out. Now with all my years past, looking backwards, I'm a little embarrassed of myself as an E6, not knowing these things. But I was young, right? I was fast tracking, and nobody ever gave me that mentorship. And so I think that it's really awesome. You had people kind of giving you that guidance, like, hey, go get this, go get that. And when you put in for chief, did you know that year that you were competitive for chief?
So I was sort of fast tracked. So I first took the chief's exam at 9 years.
Okay.
I caught a 78 out of 80. I didn't make chief, right? I killed the test. I didn't make chief. Now I'm all butthurt, right?
Yeah.
Then I saw the next year, scored at 76, didn't make chief. And I saw some people that were making chief who were like, I thought they were just shit bags, but I get it. And that's when that same chief that's the year that I went after my Dolphins, but I was having looking at my package for chief. And he goes, hey man, this is great. This is all the things you've done. He goes, now I need you to look in the mirror and say, what are you not doing?
Yeah.
And that was that was an eye opener, because we all look in the mirror and want to see that cape. We're all superheroes, but what are you not doing?
Yeah.
And that sort of brought it in perspective.
So what were you still at SDV Team 2 though when you made chief? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. What year was that when you put on your anchors?
96.
1996. All right. So what was Chief's initiation like in 1996 at an SDV team? Was there an initiation? Did you guys even do it?
We did. We didn't. So the initiation, we were deploying a lot.
Okay.
So the season, we didn't do the whole season like a lot of the stuff during the season, but final night, man. Final night was sort of heinous. And they had their own Chiefs club. They lined all the walls with plastic, and they had no kidding stocks and a coffin. And
I will tell you, the more old guys I talk to the more that it told me there really wasn't no season of Pride, no season of Chiefs initiation. There was just like a final night, and then it was
Final
kind
night,
of
man.
fun, right?
So to give you an idea, we had go to the beach, doing a white hat ceremony. We had dug holes in the sand at the surf line, kneeled in them. They filled them back up, mask and snorkel on, water's coming in. They're pouring stuff down the snorkel.
Yeah.
You're trying to get it out.
Ugh.
And then at the Chiefs Club, when we got there, they had the full-on judge, and it was no joke, right?
Yeah.
And they were selling eggs for $1 a piece, and everything had chicken wire. So when they were whipping the eggs, they'd break on the chicken wire. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite the
It's a big mess. Huh?
yeah. But you know what? I didn't take it personally. I didn't take it as degrading.
Yeah.
It's like some people nowadays like, oh, I'm not going to do this. And I get it. Times change, but I never viewed it that way.
I think that it would be, I think where a lot of people confuse it is that they think that it was like 7 weeks of hell, and it wasn't like that. It was a night of hell, right? But it wasn't a whole 7 week long process. Whereas arguably now our Chiefs initiation is it's an exhausting task, not just for the selectees, but also for the Chiefs.
Right.
Because I remember thinking, man, it was a lot harder to go. It's harder to do initiation as a chief than it was as a selectee, because as a selectee, you get carved out all this sacred time just to focus on your chief selectee crap. Whereas the Chiefs, we got to do our jobs, we got to do all the things, plus we got to support all these endeavors, right? But I think the other thing is, I'm sure back when you went through initiation, alcohol was a main factor. And I think that was what I always heard was one of the contributing things that made there be a problem, right?
Yeah, like the golf outing.
The golf outings are always the ones that bring up the alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you put on Chief, you put on Anchors, you get through initiation. Where do you go after SDV Team 2?
Underwater construction team 1, right around the corner.
So staying on Little Creek.
Yeah, the CEO at SDV wanted me to stay. I had originally got an order there for 4 years, then they changed our seashore to 5 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Then they extended me for a year, so I was at 6 years, and he wanted me to stay there. And I said, if I stay here any longer, I'll probably screw my career for the future.
Yeah.
So I went to underwater construction team, which is CDs, and did about 2 years there, and then I went to be an instructor.
Yeah. So what were you thinking about career at that point? Were you hoping for Master Chief?
I never thought I'd be an E5, honestly. So when I made, I was looking at how do I make senior chief. I wasn't really thinking about Master Chief. How do I make senior chief? And then and really at the time, I realized back then that if you truly come into work every day with the idea of how do you make things better, how do I make my people successful, do we have the resources we need, thinking positively, that your evals sort of wrote themselves because you're already doing those things. You're in that mindset. And so I was there 2 years, and then I went to instructor duty, and that's where I picked up senior chief.
What was it like going from a Chiefs mess in STV to a Chiefs mess with CB's at underwater construction team?
So when I got to the team, underwater construction team, I'd only been there like maybe 2 weeks, maybe. And we were going to go on this FEX, right, their field exercise.
Okay. So
we packed up a bus, like a Greyhound, put all our gear on board, and we rode from Little Creek up to Brainerd, Minnesota, Camp Ripley, to do this FEX.
Okay.
So the very first day, now we're all in. So now the very first morning we're doing quarters. We're going to do muster. Now remember, I've spent 6 years in the field with SEALs, right?
Yeah.
So I go out. It's cold up there. I go out and my uniform slicked. camis, old school cami, but they're slick, nothing on them.
Right.
Blouse tucked into my pants, pockets sewn on the sleeves, balaclava, not my cover, and I'm out there. And the one master chief goes, "What, Doc? What are you doing?" I go, "We're in the field, man." And even further on, when we had the CO come out, and he was like inspecting us around the field, he was gigging somebody on their boots, and I started laughing out loud. And they gave me a dirty look. I'm like, "We're in the field, man." Really? Okay. So it was a bit of a transition.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, they take their chief stuff seriously. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And,
it was a big transition.
Yeah, I bet. And their organizational structure, their discipline, I gotta give it up to the CBs, man, because they are hard freaking core, man.
Yeah.
They really are. And I got nothing but love for them. And if they're gonna support, if they get to go ahead to support you, you've never had a better friend. But if they don't got to go ahead and support you, you are getting nothing. You're getting no help. They're not going against the grain unless they get an order. That's just how it goes. But you were only there for 2 years, you said?
2 years. I left early because of the instructor duty. Yeah.
How'd you get the instructor duty? Where'd you go be an instructor at?
IDC school.
Did you apply for that, or did you get how'd that work?
I just talked to the detailer about, every 6 months or so, because back then you could call them up and say, "Hey, what's come up in the pipeline?" And because of it was really based because of my experience of, I was an independent duty corpsman now for 8 years with a lot of field experience, and they said, "Hey, they could probably use you at IDC school."
Yeah.
And
you're a senior chief at the time.
Yeah. No, I was a chief, still a chief.
Still a chief. So you picked up senior chief at IDC school.
Right.
So is IDC, and that's still San Diego.
Right.
And does 9/11 happen while you're at IDC school?
It did actually, yeah.
Okay. So 9/11 happens, and you're at IDC school teaching people. What's that look like from your perspective as a senior chief at IDC school?
As far as the training, or
just the energy of the Navy and the op tempo of everything that's going on around you? Because you've got to finish up your instructor duty, but you've also got all this expeditionary background already. You've already got all this other stink on you, and we're sending people forward in a way that, we did the Gulf War, and you experienced that, but it was a little different of an animal after 9/11.
So it was interesting because I actually taught the trauma medicine and sports medicine portion, and I wasn't proud. I'd go outside of the box to bring other people and instructors, and we actually got at the time we actually were able to set up the LA trauma, where we could take IDC students up for a weekend up to LA, and they'd work up there in the ER, because my mentality was psychologically the first time they see something shouldn't be the first time they see something like in battle.
Yeah.
And I had some pretty chilling videos that I would show in the class. And I had a couple of instructors tell me, "You're sick, dude." And they walked out. And I had to sit and talk to them and say, "Look, if they don't see this, they don't brace themselves, and they're going to freeze." We also had a very robust animal lab, pig lab, that we ran that, take them in. So they're doing a lot of live tissue stuff. And it was a lot of hands-on. And it's very humbling, because I still have people to this day. There's a guy here literally at the clinic here on base here in Guam. He was one of my students. He's a PA now.
Nice.
He goes, "Man, this guy taught us so much stuff." Blah, blah. And I'm like, it's humbling.
The hospital corps rate, they really they earned their paycheck. Along with the United States Marines, along with everybody, right? But the corpsmen in particular, right? That corpsman up was a thing again, right? It was a big deal. And so after IDC school, where did you go to go back to deployable duty?
I got called up went to air projects.
Where is that? What's that?
It's this thing, Naval Research Lab, NRL.
Okay. And was
that was out of Hueneme.
Okay. And so were you working with CBs again?
No, just
People
group of
doing
pirates.
things?
Yeah.
Okay. How was that 3 years? How was that duty? Are you still married to your wife at that time?
No.
Okay.
I was, but the thing was that it was a weird duty. Gone a lot. If you got an award, you had to bring your uniform in a dark bag. You couldn't wear it till you got over there. Your awards pretty much said for being here and doing,
Doing the things.
Yeah.
Doing the things.
Yeah.
So you did that. Was that a 3-year hit?
Mm-hmm.
Did you enjoy
Well,
that?
It was. No, I enjoyed it. I did and I didn't. So what had happened was it was people would go to that command. You could stay there for 20 years.
Yeah.
In that command once you're there. And at one point, the whole command was pretty much all Master Chiefs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. There was like very few lower enlisted, right? When I got there, it had changed, but historically. But what had happened was it got to be like Groundhog Day, and I had a bad time with the CO and the XO. So, one of the things in IDC school, you're taught you never throw your commanding officer under the bus for anything. We were in a meeting one day, and he was actually asking me about dental readiness, and I explained it to him. And we had, if you think about like a wardroom meeting, or you got everybody around the table. He goes, "Well, I'm not, Doc. I'm not." Right? And he's like, and I pulled out my list, and I go, "Well, your name's on this list, sir. I just thought it was in bad taste to throw you out in front of everybody. We would have talked after the meeting, but since you brought it up." So when the director of the program had come out, he asked me how I liked it. And I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay." But so then he calls me out in front of the director. Well, let me back up. So what happened? They made me the PRT coordinator.
That's always a bad idea.
So I'm the
PRT.
PRT.
Should never be the PRT coordinator.
So I was already CFL qualified PRT coordinator.
Yeah.
He was going after this one chief who should have been gone. This guy was probably 35%. He was huge.
Yeah.
But PRT comes around, he failed. CO, XO, couple of chiefs, all these people failed. And I just put it all in the system. And he goes, "Hey, did you put that in the system?" I go, "Yeah, but if you want me to lie, I can change it." And he stormed out, ordered me to get a new scale. And so when he called me out in front of this program manager, right, that came down from DC about, "Doc, understand you don't like it here." And I said, "Well, sir, it's not that I don't like it here. I just I've done my time deployed." And he goes, "Well, what is it?" And I go, "Well, we can talk." He goes, "We're all family." I said, "Well, you're a hypocrite. I really don't respect you as my commanding officer. I just don't think we're a good fit."
Yeah. And
that was sort of game on, man.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. That's a wrap.
But I had made Master Chief at that time. And when I went to the Senior Enlisted Academy, came back, I made Master Chief. You know what he said to me? "Man, I don't believe you made it." So now I'm a Master Chief. And I called the detailer, right? And I said, "Hey, man, do I need to transfer? What's up?" He said, "They just built this new command in Little Creek. We want you to go to. It's and I'm still medical, right? So I went. It was NECC, but it wasn't called NECC when it first was.
Was it Riverines?
No, it was. I'll think of it. But at my cross country trip when I got there, now it was NECC.
Okay.
So now I stepped up to that billet as the Force Medical Master Chief.
But was it Riverines at that point?
Riverines was one component. It was EOD, Riverine, diving, MESG. It was. So what had happened? They took all the dogs and cats that really didn't have a TICOM and sort of pushed them all up under NECC as an expeditionary command.
Okay. So that's where the Force Master Chief, that's like where Rick's training went to and stuff like that was NECC.
Right. So he was the force for NECC. I was just medical at the time when I got
Force
there.
Medical. Okay. So then how long is that a whole 3-year billet back in Virginia Beach?
So what happened was I'm sitting there as a Force Medical Master Chief, and about 3 months into my tour, they said, "Hey, we don't have a Command Master Chief. Would you dual hat for a couple months?" So all right. 4 years later, I'm checking out. Well, 3 years as the CMC and the Force Medical. And now I'm on my way to Fleet Forces.
So back in those days, was there CMD CMs in that warfare arena? Or was it like just collateral duty, like EOD CMs? Or
no, they weren't.
Because they didn't even have EOD CMs then, right?
They didn't palm for the billet yet.
Okay.
So it was in their requirements, but they hadn't gotten the billet filled yet. So when they asked me to do it, they had a guy doing it. He left. He was an MA. Then he left.
Oh, yeah.
And then they asked me to do it, and then I wound up staying there for 4 years.
Man. I was talking with Lisa Tisdale the other day on this podcast, and we were talking about unfunded billets. And God, I hate unfunded billets.
Yeah.
Nothing is worse than the United States Navy telling you, we know you need all these people, and then we're not going to fund it.
Right.
Right? There's just nothing worse than that, man. And then they're going to hold you accountable to mission success while telling you in the exact same breath that we know you're short about X amount of bodies.
Right.
Right? Make that make sense, man. Like that does not, God, I hate that, right? God, I hate that. Anyway, I digress. So you got your first taste of the CMC role there under NECC. What did you like that taste?
I don't want to say I was ambiguous at the time, because remember now the Navy I grew up in, the senior Master Chief Command was Command Master Chief, right?
Right.
And so now here I am sitting in the seat, and both from the medical side and from the CMC side, trying to do things in the community where people will say, well, I'm senior to you, or, throw that out. Excuse me. And I had what was troubling for me was the shenanigans and the mess. For the White Hats was, hey, Master Chief, it was no big deal because I was already a Master Chief there and I was already working with them. But give you like a little example. So one day, admin, which they moved to the 3rd floor, I don't know why, but they did in this building. They had a bunch of paper, like hundreds of boxes on these pallets. There was no elevator in the building at the time. So we had to do the old-fashioned, load it up the stairs. So I come out and I see them loading this paper, and I'm like, well, where's your working party? So I just took off my blouse and started helping them, right? Well, then when a couple of chiefs walked by and saw me out there, then it was, hey, we got this. But if I hadn't been out there, they wouldn't just
they would let the YNs carry it all by themselves. Yeah.
But if I can digress just a little bit, I want to back up. When I was an instructor in IDC school, the paradigm of leadership that really struck a chord with me, I had a commanding officer there, and it was all about servant leadership. And it did a real deep dive. And that was what I sort of modeled the rest of my career on, servant leadership. Yeah. So if you take the pyramid, right, and flip it upside down, where you're holding the pyramid up. And I always use that as my model of how, again, going back to how do I make my people successful? Do they have the tools to do the job? And that was always my biggest, foremost concern. How do we get people what they need to be successful? And how do we mentor them and instill in them the pride and professionalism to pick up the torch?
So would you say that, so you had all your students when you were an IDC instructor at that special projects job? I mean, I don't know what that staff would look like, but would you say that that CMC role you filled at NECC was your first real taste at having a whole bunch of people organizationally underneath you that you were responsible for directly?
Well, I think that from a military perspective, like as the independent duty corpsman,
Yeah,
you always have a lot of people you're responsible for, right?
for sure.
Where-
Medical readiness, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But from a military perspective of
Like direct report.
yeah, and I gotta be honest, I had a real life-changing experience there, man. I had a hardcore freaking chief of staff. I used to call him Satan. And we had an award ceremony, right?
Yeah.
And it was sort of, half-ass award ceremony. And he afterwards he pulled me, he goes, if you can't get an award ceremony right, how the hell are you doing anything right? And that really hit a chord with me, man. And it became sort of a
Point of pride, huh?
a point of pride, but also later on it led to another interesting development in my career.
Okay. So at NECC, was your boss an admiral or was it an 06?
I had a 2-star.
2-star.
Yeah.
And the chief of staff was an 06, post tour major
06.
commander?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And because the higher you go up in the food chain is where officers start to lose their attachment to their senior enlisted, at least in the Navy.
Right.
And they start to get this bigger than thou thing where I could hear him say those words to you, right? Because I'm a post tour major commander, blah, blah, blah. And then,
But he was.
yeah, I could see that. Was he a SWO? Or was he an EOD guy?
He's
Was he a
swole.
SWO? He was
But we're
pissed off
still
he's in
friends
an
to this
NECC
day.
command.
What's that?
I was like, he was probably pissed off he was a part of an NECC command as a SWO.
Yeah, the original command was pretty eclectic. But
I bet it was. Yeah.
But I got to tell you something that really, the admirals that I had there, probably one of the smartest for me that I thought most spot on Admiral Pottinger. She was freaking on the money, man, of like business rules and, enterprise rules. And she listened. So, for example, we had all the rankings. We did the chief rankings, senior chief rankings. And then they always did a breakout where they let the department heads, civilians and the active duty department heads then do their own rankings.
Right.
So I went in and said, hey, can we not do that this year? Let's get them all in the conference room. I'll put the rankings up on the board and I'll speak to each person as to why they're ranked where they're at. I'll answer any questions in an open forum, and then we should be able to move on and we can discuss anything. And I told them, I said, I know this is just a recommendation from the mess, but I think it's better to have this face-to-face instead of them second guessing. So I had, prior to that, I had the chief of staff called me in and he goes, hey, can I talk to you, Master Chief? I'm a little concerned about the rankings because all the Master Chiefs here are white, and I said, before you insult me and go any further, your number one E7, number one chief is a black female. Do we need to discuss this any further? No.
Right.
I said, all right.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. So, got the orders going to Fleet Forces Command coming out of NECC. Did you want to go to be a Fleet Forces, or is it medical? Were you going there to be the Fleet Forces medical for like, at that time, was it considered to be First Fleet or not First Fleet, but
it was still Fleet Forces at the time. So what happened was I was at NECC, right? So Fleet Forces from the medical perspective was our TICOM,
right?
And then we were to Echelon 3, I believe, because we were the TICOMs, right? So it was NECC, SURF, LANT, Sub-LANT, all the TICOMs. So the guy who was sitting in the seat called me up, and I had orders already. I was getting penciled in to go to, I was supposed to go to Sigonella. And then they wanted me to go to Bahrain. So I was penciled in to go to Bahrain to be the 5th Fleet medical guy. Okay. And then I got a call from the guy at Fleet Forces, and he said, hey, would you consider putting package in for this job? I said, I don't know, man. I don't really qualify. I'm not a fleet sailor. He goes, I think you do well here. And so when I interviewed for the job, the admiral at the time, good man, he's like, what do you think your detractors are? I said, I don't have the street creds. Never done ship time. I mean, I've been on ships, but I'm not a fleet sailor.
Yeah.
And he asked me at one point, he said, what's your pros? And I said, well, sir, I'll tell you when your pants are down. I said, I won't pull punches, you know. And we had a great relationship. I went over there and but again, going back to looping that story in, so I go back there. Now I'm at Fleet Forces. And there was an award ceremony, and the person who was the command master chief wasn't around. So Mike Stevens was the fleet at the time. He goes, hey, can you handle that? I said, yeah, no problem. So we had this award ceremony. And that was when Second Fleet went away and started merging the Fleet Forces, right? So when they did this big ceremony, they had a guy at the flagpole running up colors. Well, our flagpole was multi-directional. He started putting the flag upside down. They pull it down, went to pull it back up, upside down again.
Yeah.
Admiral Harvey, if you have not heard about Admiral Harvey, he was old school slow. I think if he had a gun, he would have shot the guy. He's yelling and screaming. The bands. I mean, this was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So we had the award ceremony. That was on a Thursday. Mike Stevens calls me in on Friday. He goes, hey, you saw what happened at the Second Fleet ceremony and everything. I goes, yeah, I go, that's unfortunate, blah, blah, blah. He said, Admiral Harvey wants you to be the command master chief. I said, I'm very humbled. I'm not interested. I did that for 3 years. You have post 95 80s in the command. And he just said, well, we're not asking. And that was it. You there?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, is that you or me?
That's me.
Oh.
The Wi-Fi dropped. Okay, well, the good news is I was recording that. So hopefully, I'm going to go back and check my recording here. Should be good up to that point.
All right.
Let me check my library here.
How can you're in the States, man. If anybody's Wi-Fi dropped, it should be me.
My neighborhood has got problems when it comes to the Wi-Fi.
You haven't thought about Starlink?
I've not gotten there yet. Let me go back into the studio here.
I still see your emblem up on the corner of the screen.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So we are back. I will have to make sure I get that edited when I do my editing. So we ask you to be the Fleet Master Chief.
To be the command master chief for Fleet Forces.
So the staff CMC.
Right.
Okay. So you go to be a staff CMC, and I could see where the McPon or he's a Fleet Forces CMC could use somebody to help keep the cats and dogs.
Right.
it away so he's not getting into trouble. I mean, I did a hit as a staff CMC, so I definitely see the need for that. Did you enjoy that?
It was interesting. It was a rough time. It was during a rough period, and everybody was scared to talk to Admiral Harvey. But he puts his pants on like everybody else, right? So if you went in there and you were halfway intelligent, you wouldn't get flame sprayed. But it was during the time when we were doing perform to serve.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the hardest jobs I had to do was tell. So if you remember when we did that big rip, and I had to go tell sailors that, hey, you know what? You've been a stellar sailor. You've done everything the Navy's asked for you to do. You got to go home.
Yeah.
I had a master chief that had to send home.
How do you think that affected us to today's current manning challenges?
I think we did it to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we didn't manage the communities correctly over the years.
Okay.
The perform to serve, though, really bothered me from the mental health perspective. Because I talked to the Admiral. I said, think about this. I got an E5, 2 kids. He's a year out. His wife says, where are we going? He says, I don't know. Now he's 6 months out, and they still can't plan because they don't know if he's staying in the Navy or not, right?
Yeah.
The other interesting thing that happened during that time, Rick West was the MCPON. And I already knew Rick. Mm-hmm. And so he had come to the command. So he would sit in with like Fleet Stevens and all the TICOMs. And because I was the command master chief, I'd get invited to the meetings. And he said to me, Doc, what's on your mind? And I always felt like, well, I don't speak out here and all these big wigs. And I said, well, my concern is that you have thousands, literally thousands of people on limited duty, and you don't know where they are.
Yeah.
And he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, back in the day, if you were put on limited duty, you were assigned to a unit at the hospital. So you were at one of the big hospitals on limited duty. You mustered every day. You went to your medical points. And we don't do that anymore. We do the 105 status? And I said, and so you have people that literally have checked out of the Navy. They just call in and you don't know where they're at. And he was like looking at me. And so I called a friend of mine that was out in San Diego at the time. He goes, yeah, I got some guy. I just found out he's in Colorado. He's not even near here. So that's when they started implementing. What they did is reinforce the programs that were already supposed to have LIMDU coordinators, the command, which didn't have to be medical, just the point of contact for follow up and make sure people were seeing through their whatever they were doing.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, that LIMDU program is still a problem.
Yeah.
When I was in the Navy, it was, fortunately, you didn't get a bunch of LIMDUs in Guam. And now I started my base CMC job, but I've heard horror stories from other base CMCs that would just get all these LIMDU bubbles and not have nothing for them to do and be playing shenanigans with the hospitals, So
I'll tell you one of the big issues I had, and it sort of percolated up, but we had 7 or 8 females that showed up because they were all pregnant. They were on a carrier. I think they were on the Ike or whatever carrier they were on, and they showed up to command. So I put them on quarterdeck watch because they couldn't get into some areas because they didn't have security clearances, right?
Yeah.
So they came into the office one day complaining about, being on quarterdeck and blah, blah. And I said, and I had a heart to heart with them. I said, the Navy invested a lot of money in all of you. And you all went and got pregnant because you didn't want to be on the ship. And now you're off the ship. So your other shipmates are sucking up your duties because they're short. And now you're here. And I said, this is your job. This is your appointed place of duty for now. So get used to it. And so they all, because I had what had sparked that was I had to come up with a lactation station. Right?
I've been there. I have been there. I've been there. I have been. I've been there. Oh my God. I remember I had these LIMDU MAs and they couldn't arm up. And I was like, you know what? I told CO, I was like, I want to just re-rate them. Right?
Right.
Like if you're not going to be able to fit to be carrying a gun, then you need to change rates. And we'll go ahead and get that going. That started getting a bunch of people pissed off at me, boy. that was really what started getting me to have problems with all the MAs, is because when I started saying we're going to re-rate people, because they were doing things for the security forces, they just weren't standing watch.
Right.
They were doing other things for them. But guess what? We need them to stand watch. We need them to be on post. That's what we
Right.
need. All right, before we get ahead of ourselves and get on to there, is it during your Fleet Forces time that you decided to put in for the Command Master Chief program?
I didn't decide to. So what had happened was
what happened was
I got called into a meeting with Fleet Stevens, Glenn. I forget Glenn's last name. And in essence, I got called into a meeting with all of the CMCs from all the TICOMs.
okay.
And was told that you've been riding this train too long. I heard a bit because I've been wearing that badge now going on 5 years, right? They
How
said,
many years were you in the Navy at this point?
24.
Okay, so you've been a Master Chief now for a couple duty stations, wearing a cookie, right, as a collateral duty senior enlisted leader, and now they're telling you basically they're about to make you an offer you can't refuse.
Pretty much. And then I said, look, even if I wanted to, I don't have enough time to do all the PQS and get everything done. And they pretty much got everything signed that day. And so there I am. I put my package in.
I said, we know a guy.
The one of the reasons that I did sort of look at it was because of the way the CMC program in general was going. I realized if I didn't, I couldn't be in a position to facilitate any changes. And my focus was still the hospital corps. So if I wanted to think about being the force of the hospital corps, or do I want to be in the basement folding towels? And so that was sort of the driver. Then I said, all right, if I do this, that'll give me the chance to make a difference.
Okay, so then where's your first CMC duty station after Fleet Forces? Like, I mean, you got all this talent. They send you to Guam?
So what had happened was during the time of so this was interesting. So the Command Master Chief billet at Pac Fleet had opened up.
Okay.
So I went in and told Fleet Stevens, I said, hey, I want to put in for that billet. He said, you can't. I said, why not? I said, I'm good enough to be your CMC here at a 4-star command, but you're telling me I can't put in. He said, it doesn't work that way. That's when I started realizing the little stuff going on in the community.
Yeah.
So now I'm in the CMC course, and I get called in, and they said, hey, I have a guy who I know who's struggling out in Guam who could really use your expertise, because I was here I am now, an expeditionary sailor for freaking almost 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And so they sent me out here to be the CMC at CRG.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, their morale was tanked.
I will tell you, in the CMC community, the CRG billet in Guam is, in my opinion, top 3 most difficult CMC jobs in the Navy because of their mission set. It's freaking, they're all over the place.
Yeah. But it wasn't, I got to tell you though, it wasn't hard because of my spec ops, being at SDV teams.
Yeah.
I was into small unit stuff. So I reformatted it. We had 144 deployers, and instead of just, what they used to do is, hey, we got this mission, who wants to go? And so you'd have people with 200 days underway, and you'd have people who didn't deploy. So instead, what I did is I broke it down into 12 teams or 24 teams of 6. And 5 people deployed, 1 person stayed back as the touch point for the home debt. And you did everything as a team.
Was it still a similar mission set like it is now, where they're essentially riding and providing security for
same set?
Okay.
Same set.
I remember watching Mike Marler have that job, and that was just a bear, man.
So when we reformatted it and did it in that capacity, you knew ahead of time. You knew that you were going to be deploying at this time, that this was your work schedule.
Yeah.
It wasn't last minute stuff. And at the same time, we implemented this 96 for 96. 96 days alcohol free. You got a 96-hour liberty. We went like 712 days without an alcohol incident because it was all peer, right? It was peer driven. It wasn't me. And people like, don't screw us out. We're 96.
Yeah.
The other thing we did is every Friday we did a Liberty intention sheet for everybody. And so, you know, who would you contact? And one day somebody put my name down. And the Chiefs were a little upset. And I go, I don't care. They didn't call me once. I don't.
Yeah.
Something happened. But the other thing that happened there that was an eye opener. So when I got there, I told the guy that was the commanding officer, OIC, I said, hey, we need to start doing quarters. We PT Monday, Wednesday, Friday as a command. We should have quarters. He said, well, what do I say? I said, well, good morning. We can start there, you know. So it was our first day of doing quarters. And the khakis officers and chiefs were off to the side of the white hats. And so we break for PT. And all the khakis are bolting. So I go to find the IDC, who I actually put through school.
Mhm.
I said, Mario, what are we doing? He goes, well, they're broken. They're on permanent limb due, or, you know, permanent limb due, no PT. I said, well, I don't know what Navy you're in, but that is not my Navy. And if they're broken toys, we fix them and we get them seen. But no, that stops today. And they PT with us and they got to leave from the front. I said, I'm the oldest guy out here, bro. I'm like 55.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. They're doing it with us. So when I started implementing those changes, the junior troops saw it. And they were very accepting of, hey, this guy cares. So that helped.
What year did you land on Guam?
2012.
Okay. And that was when, I mean, because during that, was that the tour that you met like Rolo and Stella and all those different players? That
Rolo was first class when I got there, yeah.
Okay. What was Guam like in 2012 versus what it is now?
Just different. You know, I don't want to say it was, you know, I mean, it's growing, you know, everything changes, but it was it's pretty low key as far as day-to-day stuff. And it seemed like it was, I was more focused at the time at CRG. So I wasn't really into a lot of the command. I didn't get into the command stuff till after about a year. Then I started looking at the base, what's the base doing, and how do we help the base.
How was like technology and all that, like Wi-Fi, internet? Was it high speed? Was it?
Wasn't bad.
Not bad. Okay. I was in Japan 2010 to 2013, and I remember. So I was in Japan, like I was on GW for like Tomodachi when all that happened, and I just remember that internet. I remember that being the first time overseas where internet was actually a good connection with back home. Right, you could actually like FaceTime people or Skype. Really, it was like Skyping or whatever it was. I didn't do a whole bunch of that because I was underway a whole lot. But I remember that. Okay, so after you did 3 years at CRG,
2.
Then what happened? You got pulled to go somewhere else?
I got called up from the force at NECC because remember, CRG was part of the NEC enterprise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Jeff called me up and said, hey, how do you like Guam? Like, I love it, man. I'm biking out here and, you know, because I was still doing all the biking and runs and all that. He goes, well, we're standing up CTF 75. We want you to stand it up. I said, all right, I'll bite.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was at 28 years.
Okay.
And then I went to
so you were the inaugural CTF 75 CMC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plank owner there.
Plank owner there. Yeah. Is that where you retired out of?
Right.
So once you did CTF 75, got all that going. Why did you? I mean, you're at 30 years. Is that why you retired? You just were at 30 years in the Navy and it's time to go, or were you done?
No, it was interesting. So I was looking for another job.
Okay.
At the time, I had JJ was still the CMC of the base.
JJ,
was
okay.
ours, right?
Yeah.
And so they had talked both of us into applying for the Korean billet, go to Korea, and for the CTF billet. And so we both did it, and we both interviewed out of my command because we had a stew phone and everything, and we didn't care,
Yeah.
And so we interviewed, and then it was interesting because that's when I learned how the CMC program really worked. So I go to Korea, and now you got to remember, I'm in the building doing the confidential briefs and doing rock drills, and Admiral Franchetti was there. I'm talking to her, and then the admiral from the CTF that we interviewed for was there, and I said, "How's the new Master Chief working out?" He goes, "Well, I don't know him. I haven't met him yet." And I go, "How the fuck did you pick a guy you don't know when you know me, right?"
Yeah.
And that's when I really realized that it was they were starting to game things. I already knew who was going in billet. If there were 10 packages, they only saw 2. And I just had a bad taste in my mouth for all that stuff. And I'm like, and so then when I was getting ready to retire from there, so then I got a call about the intel where Dave Graham went, the IG billet in DC. Interviewed for that job, and Admiral and I had a great discussion, man. Good dude. And he said, and I respect him. He said, while we're having the conversation, he said, "You and I think exactly alike." Exactly. He said, and I think I can't have that as my advisor. I need somebody who has a different perspective. He said, "I love you, but this wouldn't, everything would be skewed one way, right?" And I understood that. And then the final thing was they wanted me at one point to go to up to region.
Oh, at Marianas.
And put a package in. And at the time, Geo was MCPON. And we put package in, but it was just taking too long. And Admiral Bolivar asked me if I'd come up to be her Master Chief till everything was sorted out. And then I said, "I'd love to, but my last day in the Navy, technically 30 years, is like November 30th.
Yeah.
And I got to think about me." I said, "If you can do an extension like till March, regardless if they pick me or not," I said, "but right now I got to worry about 30 years coming up, right?"
Yeah.
I deployed. I was like still deploying up to like 2 weeks prior to getting out. So.
Yeah. So since you already know how I feel about that whole thing as well. It's shenanigans, right? And they could try to act like there's a whole bunch of new systems or processes or whatever it is. But brother, you can still track the admiral to the senior enlisted leader as they follow each other around the world.
Yeah.
Or which I don't blame. I mean, I got it. If that's your person that you like having near you or whatever it is, so be it. I mean, they do it with their flag riders, or you can, you talk to people behind the scenes and they'll tell you who's really in the hunt for it. And it's disheartening for the people that don't get the opportunity to be in those conversations,
Right.
But at least you got some interviews, because you got a lot of people that are just like, what the hell? I'm not getting nothing.
Right.
I'm trying to
think back. Who was the, and I can see his face. I'm just losing his name. He was the corpsman that was the MCPON before Rick West. Oh, man.
The guy with the mustache? Terry Scott?
No, I'm sorry. Might have been after it. Not Rick Scott.
Campa, Joe Campa, brother.
So,
Campa.
You know what they actually told our class? I asked the question like, "Hey, why do we even do this? Yeah. Why is that the senior guy in the class, in the command, the master?" And they said, "We don't want another Joe Cap to happen."
But you know what?
But they never gave me a reason why.
The deck plates love Joe Campa. He just wasn't liked by all the insiders, right? He was draining the swamp. He came to drain the swamp. And that's my opinion, right? My opinion was because he was an outside pick, right? He wasn't a part. He didn't work his way up the ashes for 4, 3, 2, 1 and be a part of this senior group. Because you know, like I knew, bro, when they start to get in these little meetings where they really start to think that their shit don't stink, excuse my language, and they
Yeah.
really think that they're the ones making policy, bro,
Right.
you're not. You're really not.
And it was sad to me over time because it appeared we became the animal we were trying to not to be, that we were trying to prevent.
I will tell you that there is nothing more powerful than the unit level Chiefs mess, right? But when you start getting these people at these different tier levels who think that they're really in leadership positions and they're just advisors to flag officers, bro, you don't have anyone who works for you directly. And then they started bringing in these staff CMCs, which, I mean, like you already had shown, right? You were the guy as the staff CMC taking care of the staff.
Right.
And I guess the idea behind this is you're supposed to be taking care of all those CMCs that are out there as Essex, right? But here's the thing. They're not doing that neither because they're too afraid to put themselves in the line of fire for their master chiefs.
The politics just it. So I was sort of always I always believe in doing the right thing. Might not be the popular thing, but I believe in doing the right thing. And I didn't let the politics sway me. Now, I would listen, but if I didn't feel it was a good decision, I would voice my opinion, knowing that what I had to say was just a recommendation. It wasn't my decision, but I would at least put it out there.
You know what taste really hit me in the mouth that was sour is when I started having flag master chiefs tell me how important it was that they were aligned with the JAG or the PAO, right? And I'm like, you're more worried about what the JAG and the PAO say than you're worried about what the master chiefs are telling you from the deck plates?
Yeah.
Bro, that's a problem because their freaking jobs as the JAG or the PAO, unfortunately, was weaponized to push narratives, right? And then you got these CMCs who are more worried about being aligned with JAGs and PAOs than they were with the deck plates. And then here you go, right? You got a whole bunch of people that are freaking politicians and they're federal bureaucrats and wearing anchors, and they're just anyway.
The sad part is that when you turn that corner, you lose the perspective going back to the servant leadership, right? If I'm not focusing on the quality of life and the mission readiness of my juniors, because I'm too worried about who's parking in my parking place here, then it becomes an issue. You really, I really believe if you don't get out there, you lose touch. I give you one example of that. Here I am, the medical mass chief for fleet for NECC. And we're looking at all this gear. And I got a guy that comes in and says, hey, I got this new bag. He's trying to sell me on the bag. And I said, Brian, that's great. I think it's a great piece of kit. I'm not going to be carrying it.
Yeah.
Let's go out to the different commands and talk to the E3s and E4s and let them T&E it. And he just looked at me. I said, if they like it, even because when you're at that level, you're just a walking checkbook, right? Well, I'd have people come in and try to sell me stuff for Second Fleet. And I said, well, that's great, but I need Second Fleet to tell me they want it. I don't need you trying to sell it to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so letting the sailors have input into their gear and their mission readiness, and that empowers them, right? How do you empower them so they feel like, hey, I'm part of this?
I will tell you that nothing is so. Seventh Fleet, for example, right? I remember being on the deck plates and seeing all the TADs and seeing all the TDYs that we're using to cover all these gap billets. And this was happening when I'm on the ship Ashland down in Sasebo, and we're down there being creative in their expeditionary strike group, trying to make sure we're all able to go to sea. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, who the hell is managing all this crap? Because you got all these damn NECs we gotta have. And then I get pulled up to go to 7th Fleet. And I'm sitting in the room and I'm thinking, no one's talking about this. But of course, this is after Fitz and McCain. And so now everyone's like freaking, oh my God, how is this happening? Bro, been happening. Nobody was talking about it from the deck plates because I'm not here for it, right? I'm not here for it because it's just like the unfunded billet conversation. People were just shutting up and doing their best to make it work, right? And everybody wanted to claim freaking plausible deniability. I remember I was in one meeting one time, and they were up there mapping out the ops schedule for like the whole fleet, right? And we're in the Blue Ridge, we're in the little room that they have all the officers in.
Right.
And I'm like, where's the Liberty ports, bro? Like, where's their Liberty ports? Where's their R&R Liberty ports for all these underway days? That we were told that after Fitz and McCain, they were going to start to have less underway days or less op tempo days or whatever it was. And you should have seen the looks I got. Like, what the hell? Who are you? I was like, I'm the staff master chief, so I'm nobody. But I'm just like, I just came from that ship, and they're great, but they deserve a Liberty port. Those Marines want to go to Liberty port somewhere.
Yep.
We got to be planning that crap out. And it was just, I look at, and then I watch people go, when you go from being freaking a TICOM, or like, say you start off being like an air wing or a carrier master chief, and then you go to being a fleet master chief or a CTF master chief and a fleet master chief and a force master chief. Brother, you are part of the problem by that point.
Yep.
Right? You are just carrying the water all the way to the top, and you're not. And here's the other thing. I know how you are behind closed doors when somebody doesn't agree with you and you throw a freaking temper tantrum. Right? Because you forget that we're all just chiefs in the Chiefs mess, and you want people to kiss your ring because supposedly you get special access to the Admiral. No, bro, you go in the same time as the JAG does and the same time as the PAO that you're so worried about.
You know, the reality is of the big picture, and you know, I would tell the chiefs, I said, when we on the timeline, right, we're at 250 years. The Navy's been an organization.
Yeah.
All of us were just a blip on that timeline. And at the end of the day, your legacy is not your shadow box. Your legacy is the people's lives that you touched, who became great sailors and continue to move forward and are still passing that down. That's really when I get phone calls and messages from sailors that work for me as E3s, who are now chiefs, senior chiefs, master chiefs, still thanking me and, you know, helping them out in their careers, and the mentorship piece, that's really your legacy. And I think people just lose that. They I don't know. I'm better. I don't have time.
I will tell you the other thing I have for this one before I'm done talking about it, though, is if I feel very strongly that if you get put in the position to be an ISIC command master chief, your job is to not just to give advice to that freaking naval officer that you're attached to, but your job is to watch out for every one of the command master chiefs that work beneath that are with your supporting commands, right? Because if they get in a position with a commanding officer that's a jerk, right? They have nobody except for you. And when you get people in those positions that are just cowards and politicians and are just worried about their next job, you get good people that get straight just shillelagh'd, right? And I can tell you story upon story of good CMCs that got left out to dry. And when the master chief should have been walking into that freaking flag officer's office and saying, that's not how this goes, and making us think about it. No, they just, brother, it's okay. Just retire, bro. It's okay. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. But then they're worried about, are they going to get that next flag job or whatever it is, because they want to stay in the Navy longer. And I will tell you, when I started seeing all that, I was disgusted. And I still talk to people to this day. I was just on the phone the other day with a brother from the leadership mess that was just raging over the phone, bro, because they're all scrambling right now.
I talk to people that same thing.
Yeah. They're all scrambling right now because it's all about to get gunked up. But I mean, ultimately, you know what? Once you retire, you don't get no higher of a paycheck, bro, because you had a freaking flag officer as your boss. Whatever. I guess if you want to go work in DC, but how's that working out for all those GS jobs? Doge is cacking all those things away. Anyway, so when you retired from the Navy, why did you choose to stay on Guam as a retirement home, retirement location?
So I found Guam to be very family centric, and for Don and I, we'd been here now. She retired in 14, and she came out, so we'd been here together for 2 years. And then she's from Philly, I'm from Chicago, and it's like, well, we don't like the cold.
Yeah.
So we stayed, and then I was managing. Well, you remember where I was living in it on the bay, and then they asked me to manage it.
That's right.
So we were thinking about, hey, well, we'll figure something out, So I was living there for free, managing the complex, and then they brought me in as a training officer for the base, and then
okay.
And so, and it was weird because I had only been retired from the Navy about maybe 7-8 months when I started that job. So it was almost like being a Master Chief again, going back in there as a training officer. But
right.
I knew all the players, right? It wasn't like new ground. I knew all the players. Everybody knew me as a Master Chief. So it gave me, I think it gave me a leg up on the job. And then we now retired, but there's really, we're invested in Guam, got properties out here where when I look back and see some of the stuff going on in the States, there's nowhere I could say right now that I'd say, oh, I want to go move there.
Yeah. Now, I would tell you Guam is great as long as you don't mind the being away from everybody, right? That you want to see in the States.
Right.
I love Guam. That's a part of my heart on Guam. I love the people. I love the community. I love the island. So I can see it, right? Plus, I love just being able to go down to the beach whenever I want to, go down to the ocean. My pool in my backyard, me and Erica, we literally pick things that give the water the same color as the water in Guam, right? That was 100% part of our purpose because of how much we love the island, and we just wanted to. When we look at our pool out of our back window, I want that color of water out my patio, right? Because walking out my house for all those years in Apper, you could just look right out and see the ocean, and that was just you can't make it up. I think when you were the training officer for MBG, I don't think people understood how big of a job that really was, right? Like you were coordinating all those training areas, coordinating all those different things that was going on there, and then by the way, there's so much demand for what CNIC is tasked with in the world that should not be CNIC's responsibility.
Absolutely. Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
I loved Guam for so many things. God, I hated working for CNIC. What a freaking right behind my lack of taste for some of the senior enlisted leader positions, whatever. CNIC is another place that I think that the United States Navy needs to just reorganize that whole thing. Right. Yep. My heart went out to Admiral Manoni when he ended up becoming the CNIC admiral, bro, because I know he had to hate that job.
Right.
God, but CNIC that should be, honestly, it should be, I don't know who should own that job. I heard they restructured JRM a little bit to now give them a little bit more of an operational role by.
Yeah, but there's some weirdness going on out here. They put an Indo-PACOM billet up there, so you got a 2-star and a 1-star
in the same building.
In the same building, and I just found out about 6-7 months ago. No, about a year ago. I was in Atsugi, and they're talking about moving a 4-star Indo-PACOM to Atsugi. And I said, well, how are you going to do that if you got a 3-star at 7th Fleet? Won't be stepping on each other. I don't know where it's at in the process, but just some weirdness.
Yeah. Does the 2-star get his own CMC as well as the 1-star get his own CMC?
I would imagine. Really, by doctrine, I guess they're 2 separate entities, but all that stuff comes out of Hawaii anyway. So
they probably gave the 2-star like a Marine. That's what I would do, right? I'd give him a Marine vice a sailor just to offset that. Because now with the Marines coming there, it just makes sense, right? Yeah. Okay. Looking back on your time at MBG or looking back on your time after Guam, anything in particular that you want to hit on for that, or are you just glad that it's all over?
As far as
Just your career, your life in general. Because I will tell you, you were a major player when I got to Guam. You gave me a lot of advice. You, Tim Moon, and just getting familiarized with the island and all that. But then after COVID, I think that was after COVID is I think when you kind of called it, right? Was that when you gave up being the training officer?
well, I was working with that the new OPSO, the Marine
Yeah.
Colonel,
Yeah.
and we didn't click. And I just finally said, "Hey, man, if you're gonna micromanage me," I said, I worked on a 4-star staff, bro. I don't need, because he sort of where we used to go and sit in on the meetings, we weren't allowed to go anywhere. He represented ops. Nobody else had a word. Working with Aunt Sweeney sort of wore me down. He was about the best E5 I ever said. He's a good E5, just not XO material.
I love the guy, man. It's a tough place to work, man. Like it was CNIC, it was a tough place to work. I can only, yeah. I wonder
But
who's
now, so it's interesting. So now, being here in Guam, I still doing some property management out here.
okay.
But I'm getting involved with the couple of the senators and the congressmen on the VA initiatives and veteran stuff. So working through the VFW and doing that.
I got Captain Grimes on tap. He's going to be appearing on this pretty soon. So I'm
Nice.
excited for that conversation. I love the fact that he's up at Anderson Air Force Base right now as like their executive director.
Yep.
Because all the crap that he left and I got put through for him because they didn't like him, right? But now it's poetic justice. He's on the island, still kicking ass, taking names.
I saw him at the wreath laying ceremony up at the VA cemetery, and I was getting ready to go out of town, but I told him we need to catch up.
I can't wait to have him on and just a talk shop with him and hear what his thoughts are. Hey, is Trusted Traveler back off again?
Well, they raised the we're in Bravo now, so they it was back on. It was back on, but now it's because of Bravo, it's off.
Okay. Hey, brother, I appreciate your time. I'm going to wrap up real quick by doing some rapid fire question and answers, and then we're going to call it, okay?
Sure.
All right, here we go. So, if you had your choice, would you have pizza or wings?
Pizza or wings?
Yeah.
Wings.
Okay. Would you rather clean the barracks or would you have the work a party?
Clean the barracks.
Okay, clean the barracks. Who would you rather see, De Niro or Pacino in a movie?
Pacino.
Pacino, okay. What was your favorite? Is Guam your favorite duty station?
No. I love
What
it,
was
but
it?
it's not. SDBT. You sort of bouncing in and out again.
Okay, what was your favorite duty station?
SDVT.
Okay, so that was in Virginia Beach.
Yeah. So here's why. You show up in the morning in PT gear, you PT.
Okay.
For hour and a half, take a shower. You put on PT gear, you spend the rest of your day doing whatever, and you go.
Okay.
I mean, it was PT fitness heavy, so that was. Yeah.
Okay. Throughout your career, what was your favorite Liberty port? Favorite place to go on Liberty?
Man. Spain.
Spain, Rota, Spain. Okay. What was the hardest watch qualification you ever had to get?
When I got my Dolphins.
Okay, that makes sense.
When I finished when I finished my board, I had a 3-hour board, and I felt like I was 2 inches tall, and I actually apologized to them for wasting their time.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask you anyway. Would you rather be overseas or stateside in the Navy?
Overseas.
Okay. Would you rather be independent duty or on a team?
Man, that's a hard question. I like independent duty, but I like the camaraderie of teams. So it's
Okay.
hard, sort of hard choice.
So the next question is your personal leadership philosophy, but I think I know that you're going to say servant leadership.
Yep.
Okay. So for Chiefs Mesh, Chiefs Initiation, we've got deck plate leadership, institutional expertise, professionalism, technical expertise, character, loyalty, active communication, sense of heritage, right? Out of that dip class I order, which one's your favorite?
Deck plate leadership.
I love it. Awesome. Okay. So would you rather lead or follow?
Well, to be a good leader, you got to be a good follower.
Okay.
You got to be able to follow. Yep.
All right, man. Do you have any saved rounds or alibis?
Yeah, there was one last thing I just wanted to share about sort of leadership. So when they implemented a policy on the base here, they were doing when they were having the uptick in sexual assault, they instituted this chief's watch bill for barracks, and basically you walk through the barracks, TNTs, sort of like a short patrolman on the base, right?
Yeah.
So the very first night, the very first duty, I told JJ that I'm going to take that watch. And JJ is like, well, you're a freaking command master chief. I said, yeah, but how do I have my chiefs stand the watch if I can't even explain it to them?
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm going to do the very first one and see, so we can make sure we got our heads around this. And everybody was like blown away, dude. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, not a big deal. You're going to ask somebody else to do it, you might as well be out there doing it with them, right?
Yeah.
Hey, and one other thing before we go. When you drive to Jacksonville and you go through the gate, and if there's an active duty sailor on the gate,
yeah,
you roll up to him, and as you give me your ID, I want you to look at him and say, "Hoo-yah, warrior," or "What's up, warrior?" and watch what happens. They stand a little taller. They'll even smile, because nobody explains to them their relevance and importance of the job. And just those two words, "Hoo-yah, warrior," when you see them, watch the change in their spirit. It's amazing.
For sure, man. I will tell you that it's agreed, 100%. I'm blessed. I get to see this every day with these cadets, with these kids that are coming through my program, and anybody, they just want that recognition, right?
Yeah.
And I agree. Gate guard is a tough duty station, especially with all the civilians that are intermingled in there, and there's just so much conflicting energy, right? So yeah, for sure. It was without a doubt, one of the hardest things I ever did as a CMC was to have to love and care for the MAs, right? Because that's a tough rotation to try to take care of. Try
My
to keep them
IQ
all
went
that,
down.
huh?
I lost IQ points.
Yeah.
I had 144 MAs. So my IQ dropped 10 points working with you guys.
You should have seen me trying to do the math of the watch bill rotation for the gate guards, right? I still advocate that I think freaking NECC should own all the installation security for all the installations, and that all the MAs that are a part of CRG should be doing wet side and dry side security forces, period, point blank, right? And then I think we should get rid of the GSs because they're just Doge. The Doge needs to cut all them loose, right? That's my advice, because you got GSs that can't even freaking pass a PFT, right? And they're gonna anyway. I digress, brother. It was good talking to you, man. It was good.
Same here, man. I'm glad we got to catch up, and bless you for what you're doing with them young kids, man. If you change one person's life, it's worth it.
Oh, all day long, man. These kids are freaking amazing, man. Like I told you, I had 10 of them down at a drill camp today. They're on summer vacation. They don't have to be going to drill camps and leadership training camps, and I heard them say they were going to put a new ICE facility on Camp Blanding in Florida, where we spent last week at.
Right.
They better go walk those spaces before they start putting those freaking people there, because where they had me and my cadets sleeping, they're gonna get in trouble if they put a bunch of freaking dudes from Venezuela there. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, do you compete against Rolo? Like in any?
No, Rolo's up in Pensacola in a different area.
Okay, so
Right.
you guys don't compete in any of the.
No, not any of our
No.
competitions or nothing. But I would tell you, Rolo's my guy, man. He's on my list to get him on here as well.
Nice.
He definitely. I remember when he was in Bahrain, trying to figure out what he was gonna do after the Navy. And I was like, bro, you need to go ROTC. And I'm glad he did it, man, because he got himself a good position. And he's doing great things, man.
Nice.
Yeah. So, all right, bro. I appreciate you, man. Hey, tell Donna I want to get her on here next.
I know. She said she wanted to listen to see what kind of questions you're asking. When does this thing broadcast?
I'll probably put it up later on tonight. I gotta chop out some of those things that we cut out here and there,
Yeah.
and then it'll go out everywhere that the podcasts are played on. So you can anywhere you could, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, and then I'll put it up on YouTube. If not tonight, I'll do it this weekend when I get back from the retirement ceremony tomorrow.
No worries. But with your podcast, so I can go back there and like pull up Lisa and everybody else, and there's like a library. Awesome.
Yep. All right, brother.
All right. Very cool, man.
Peace.
Talk to you soon.
Yep. Bye.
Out.
And I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know